Hello and welcome to The Time of Telling. I'm Mark Walker, and this series is based on my unpublished manuscript, The Time of Telling, John Star Cook and the Word of One Tarot, and also on the unpublished manuscript, The Lion's Tale, the magical tale of John Star Cook by Rosalind Sharp Wall. In the previous episode, we saw John, Mary, Peter, and Dan discover the meaning of the mysterious word Torerut, a word spelled out numerous times on the Ouija board in Geneva. They learned that Torerut meant crocodile in the language of some of the peoples of Angola. My own research failed to find any evidence that Torerut means crocodile in any language, although it does seem to be the name of a creator god of East Africa. And so we continue from where we left off in the last episode, reading from chapter 5 of The Lion's Tale. Next morning, they thought it was all over. They had found the tea plantation, the tea tree. They had quelled roaring lions by singing to them, and a sound like that of an atom bomb had burst over their heads. This had been succeeded by a rain of blessing and peace. But they decided to bring out the Ouija board and ask if that was all they were to do. Was there anything else? The Ouija board replied, "Mary knows." Mary said, "Make a silver star." So they got a tin can and cut out the bottom and made a 6-pointed silver star. "What are we to do with this?" they asked. "Mary knows," replied the board again. Mary said, "Very well, all right, I know." She picked up the silver star, and with Peter, John, and Dan following her, she began leading them through the jungle, through dense undergrowth that was like a maze. There would be rotten branches, John described, and she would break them, pull them apart, and make designs with them. And we'd get to another part, and there we'd find stones in the form of a T. One of the most extraordinary phenomena things in this maze was a single blade of grass in all this bed of grass, with what looked like a silk thread tied in a bow on it, which Mary untied. It was one funny thing after another like this, with Mary as though in a trance, going from place to place, picking up these various clues. Finally, we got to a very thick part of the bushes, and she said, "And now we go through this, and when we're through this, we will be there." And so they went through, and John continues, and it really was a very impressive sight. It was a huge grass meadow, a plain, and on that plain was a single enormous baobab tree. It was about 300 feet high and was, I suppose, the tree of tea, or the original tree, or whatever. We went to the tree, and each of us intuitively did something around the tree. I climbed up in it, Mary climbed up it, Peter stood at its trunk, and Dan squatted at its base with a gun still held in his hand because he thought he'd seen a lion. Each one went through some sort of experience. Mine was, when up in the tree, of seeing on my forehead the silver star, like the one Mary had carried, and it descended down into my heart and I had this love experience, or whatever you would want to call it, which was an initiation of some sort, cosmically. Mary felt as though she had left her body. What Peter and Dan went through, John did not recall. But for each one, something that seemed very real took place. No sooner had they gone through this than they looked out and saw clouds beginning to gather. A thunderstorm was coming. This meant that if they did not leave immediately, they would not get out at all, as the entire land would be flooded. This was the main reason Manuel da Costa had not wanted them to make the journey at this season, for fear of the terrible rains. So they hurried back to the camp through the maze of dense undergrowth to pack up, and on the way, Mary picked up an old cow's bone, which she said was her magic wand. This would prove useful later. When they were almost packed up, John decided to run back to the baobab tree, the one that had the big T carved in it, to take a photograph. As he was snapping the picture, he became aware of something behind him and looked around to find it was a leopard, and the leopard was watching him. I thought, oh my God, and me without a gun. Nothing but a camera, John related. So I began sort of like Winnie the Pooh, whistling and going down the trail, and it began stalking me. I tried to keep absolutely calm. It was just like a cat with a mouse, and I was the mouse. It would go on leaping ahead of me and peek around a tree, and I'd get to that tree and it would crawl around me, Luckily, down the road, a group of workers suddenly appeared out of nowhere who were going to try and fix up that part of the road. There was a dirt road from here to Kasinga, and I gestured to them, showing them the leopard, but I don't think they saw the leopard or knew what I was trying to tell them. But the leopard left me alone on seeing the group of people. There must have been 6 of them, and I got back to the camp. John says, I hope somebody finds the place where we camped, because on a tree there, where the whole thing happened, we left a carving of a tau. It was more like a JT, like a J with a circle above it. And I'm sure it's still there because Dan carved it quite deep. This tree was not the same tree that had the huge T carved on it. It was at their encampment half a mile away. They left before the rains came, but the rains were right behind them, and they drove steadily for 36 hours, just ahead of the rain, with Mary waving the bone she had found, which she called her magic wand. They made it just in time to the main road and didn't stop until they reached Lobito. At Lobito, John added, there was an extraordinary phenomenon that night. Mary and I went down to the beach, and as we were going into the water, the sun hit the horizon and made the same symbol again of the sun being a circle and the horizon, the T, and the light of the sun coming down to us across the water, making the stem of the T. Tau is perhaps a horizon with the sun over the water, and there's something very magical about it. The emerald and the 2 diamonds had also come into play during this period. On the way to Kasinga, John had lost his emerald when they were having lunch in a very green patch of jungle. It had slipped out of his pocket and landed in the green grass. They hunted and hunted, but no one could see the emerald in the green grass. Finally, John said, I'm going to turn around 3 times and spit, and where I spit, the emerald will be. He did so, and there was the emerald. As though to re-emphasize this symbol, if that is what it was, Mary lost her diamonds on the beach when they returned to Lobito. She had been playing with them in the sand, making designs. It was as hard to see diamonds in the sand as it had been to see an emerald in the green grass. They searched and searched. Finally, Mary found them, which was in itself a miracle, since there was tons of sand sparkling like diamonds. For some reason, these two events seemed very pertinent at the time, John remarked, but the significance of the jewels was never understood, nor their relation to the tea tree, the letter T, and Tory root, nor, for that matter, why they were lost and so strangely found again. The group stayed on in Lobito, with Manuel da Costa ardently pursuing Mary again until the end of February. They had to get back to Leopoldville by March the 1st for Peter to fly to Geneva to do his Swiss military service. Before leaving Lobito, Peter bought some land on a beautiful point jutting out into the sea and stored one of the cars there. At the last minute, he put an envelope containing $25,000 in cash that he'd brought from Switzerland in the car, thinking that no one would ever find it. It would be perfectly safe. In Leopoldville, the night before Peter left, John did a Dianetics run with him, which was to have peculiar consequences later and lead to his release from the Swiss Army. In this rather free-form run, creative run, Peter was to respond to drum beats which symbolized his feelings. But once in the Swiss Army, he went into a catatonic state because he kept hearing these same drum beats, and on this account was discharged from service. Perhaps this too was meant to be, or was a part of the whole Tory root design or mission, because if Peter had not been released from military service, the next chapter in Algeria could not have happened. Originally, John, Mary, and Daniel had planned to fly back to Europe with Peter, but in Leopoldville, the Ouija board had told Dan he had to go back to the States to find his wife, Joan. No instructions were given for John and Mary, but they decided, after seeing Peter off on the plane, to stay on in Africa. Dan was still with them at this point. John wanted to go to Egypt. He had always wanted to go to Egypt, and now it was not far away. But Mary, with whom he was by this time deeply in love, wanted to go to Algeria. She had heard it was warm this time of year, and she wanted to lie on beaches, forget all about Ouija boards, and have nothing to do with psychic experiences. Egypt sounded to her like more psychic experiences. The Ouija board was non-committal this time. It told them to do as they felt. John finally decided to go to Algeria with Mary. He could go to Egypt later. John was to have one more crocodile experience before leaving West Africa. They had flown over Brazzaville and were again staying at the beautiful hotel on the hill where they had first arrived on December 24, 3 months earlier. On the day Dan was to leave for New York, the three of them went to a restaurant called the Zoo for lunch. At the zoo, right in front of the restaurant, John related, there was a crocodile pit. It was a big sort of lagoon, swimming pool size, with crocodiles floating around in it among the logs. I was fascinated by the crocodiles, and while Dan and Mary were having cocktails, I was staring at them. Suddenly, something very strange happened. I felt as though I were moving into their continuum, that I was becoming one with them, or else was hypnotized by them. And I opened myself to this odd, enormous, expansive, sexual realm that was very, very strange. I felt as though I was suspended in a no man's land, and I floated sexually back into the restaurant. Mary and Dan immediately saw that something was wrong with me. I didn't want to speak. Everything was alive with sex, and yet there was a feeling of my body being completely dead and cold. The night before, as a matter of fact, I had drawn the hanged man of the tarot, and below him the crocodile snapping at his head, leaping out of the water. I didn't connect this at the time. Nothing connected. I was like a zombie, said John. John was still in this zombie-like state when Dan left on the plane, and it continued that night at the hotel in Brazzaville. Mary, worried by this time, decided to do a Dianetics run to bring him out of it. All I remember is the end of the run, John related. I felt that I was within the body of a crocodile. At the end, I suddenly saw coming around the bend a huge white snake or serpent that had a golden crown on its head. Mary asked, "What is the serpent doing?" I said, "He's going way up above me and he's leaning over me." She asked, "And now what's he doing?" I said, "He's striking down at me." I remember this feeling of being crushed into or exploded or something, and immediately I was out of that crocodile world and back into my normal state. But was he entirely? Years later, the crocodile experience was to have peculiar repercussions. And no doubt the entire crocodile theme meant more than it seemed to on the surface, especially considering the fact that in Angola the word for crocodile was toriroot, and it was toriroot that the four of them had been sent to search for in Angola. Neither John nor Mary realized when they left the Congo that spring that Mission Toriroot was not completed. They had found the letter T, the tea tree of the mysterious tea plantation, but the other letters of the word remained to be found, including the final T, which was not found until John was in Carmel, nearly 12 years later. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you very much for watching. This is the time of telling.